From futuristic bartending to corporate espionage, here are the 10 best cyberpunk games you can play on PC. Alright, so there might be one specific cyberpunk game that everyone wants to play right now. And sadly, we're all going to have to wait a while before we even come close to going hands-on with CD Projekt's gloriously detailed first-person RPG. But you can still scratch that biologically enhanced itch while we're waiting to dive into Night City. What follows then is a diverse list of games set in shadowy worlds of body augmentation, glowing terminals, and scheming corporations. It's a list I've tried to keep quite broad, so it caters for players who want to punch people with fist chisels, as well as it does those who want to serve drinks in a futuristic bar. None of these games replicate the experience of Cyberpunk 2077 exactly, but the worlds they're set in are similar. Plus, at least we'll have something to do while we wait. Pop in your cybernetic eyeballs and enjoy, in no particular order, the best Cyberpunk games you can play on PC.
Alright, thanks.
Invisible, Inc. is an isometric, turn-based stealth game set in the near future, in a world of corporate espionage and extremely handsome people wearing nice clothes. It looks fantastic and will test your planning and reaction skills in all sorts of intriguing ways. It's one of those stealth games that will make you feel incredibly cool when it all goes well, but in which you resemble a bumbling one-man band elephant when you inevitably make the wrong choices. No, you shouldn't have tried to grab that extra bit of intel before escaping. You idiot. And as well as being a stylish, tense experience, the setting and tone warrant its inclusion on this list. Like all the best speculative fiction, Invisible, Inc. feels familiar but fantastical, with a cast of immaculately slick characters that will make you feel like you're staging your own futuristic version of Ocean's 11.
Hey, did you see that?
Alright, so maybe jumping around in an ankle-length leather jacket, sticking your hand spikes into strangers, isn't the vision of the cyberpunk future that you want. In which case, the sedate, cerebral setting of Valhalla might be more your beat. The setting is familiar, a future of all-powerful corporations and rigidly applied laws, but the people you speak to really aren't. Instead of dealing with grand, sweeping conspiracy, you're serving drinks and talking to people, which makes Valhalla one of the most vivid, relatable depictions of a cyberpunk future in all of games. By mixing drinks and pulling pints in your dingy downtown bar, you're immersed in a brilliantly told story, and the ultimate outcome of the game is determined by the drinks you prepare. It's personal, engaging, and surprising. Hearing a snippet of unguarded conversation from one of your regular patrons can feel as rewarding as downing a difficult boss in an action game, and it speaks to the breadth of experiences that games can now provide. Now I know we could and perhaps should have included the first Deus Ex game on here. Yes, it's still brilliant, and yes, it's still one of the best examples of emergent gameplay in a sci-fi setting. But if you're twiddling your titanium thumbs in anticipation of Cyberpunk 2077, Human Revolution is a more immediate and familiar way to plug that gap. The setting itself is one of the most vivid, striking worlds in gaming, and the thoughtful examination of transhumanism and terrorism make it feel like a very modern, cerebral experience. Plus, you can augment your body with chisels. Lovely. And while the vanilla version famously had some issues with the boss fights, the director's cut rights many of those wrongs. And if you're still sad about me leaving off the original, please feel free to watch any of the other umpteen videos where we've given the groundbreaking Ion Storm original top billing.
Duty calls.
Transistor might feel like an odd fit at first. Vibrant, lavish, and not a troubled man in a trench coat anywhere to be seen. But the themes of murky organisations and impending doom fit this list perfectly. Protagonist Red is an unusual, reluctant hero, an opera singer who loses her voice when she discovers the mysterious, sword-like weapon known as the Transistor. And the threatening, mysterious Camerata provide a compelling antagonistic force. The breathless, kinetic combat sees you fending off a weapon known as the Process, and itself works like a computer program, a series of attacks and commands that are established beforehand, which then play out in real time. In a landscape of cyberpunk games that can sometimes seem drab to the point of being oppressive, the vivid cityscapes of Transistor are a crisp, refreshing change.
Hello world. Look at all that.
Are two cyberpunk games that include bartending too much for one list? Let's hope not, if only because that would mean omitting the incredible Red Strings Club. This thoughtful, mature adventure game is pretty unflinching, which is a polite way of saying we can't show you the Roo bits in this video, but it only helps elevate the story above much of what we're used to in games. With 3 playable characters, you'll see different sides of the deep, engaging story, whether it's pouring the perfect tipple or crafting genetic implants in a nightmarish techno-horror version of that scene from Ghost. But these aren't just gimmicks, this is a story of ethics and emotion, which somehow feels more relatable because of the unfamiliar futuristic setting. And if nothing else, it proves that in the sickly neon grind of the near future, we're all going to need a drink. To most of us, cyberpunk is shorthand for a bit like Blade Runner. And Observer, a chilling adventure from the developers of Layers of Fear, matches that description, if only because it features the legendary Rutger Hauer as a neural detective in the year 2084. But there's significant depth here as well. The horror elements are a perfect fit for Observer's bleak backdrop of societal decay. As Detective Dan Lazarski, the virtual realities you investigate cannot be trusted, leading to a taut, unsettling experience that makes you wonder why more games don't explore the darker side of a cyberpunk setting. It's bad enough that the world is falling to ruin, and worse still, that you have to explore the damaged minds of the people who inhabit it. People who've turned to drugs, VR and neural implants to escape the misery of everyday life. It's a brilliantly bleak twist on traditional cyberpunk and detective games, which deserves to infect your consciousness.
It's archaic for you, Adam.
Shadowrun Returns is one of those games we all know we should get around to playing, but we don't always know why. But 5 minutes with this deep, lyrical RPG will be enough to hook sci-fi and fantasy fans alike. This Neuromancer meets D&D adventure takes place in a futuristic world inhabited by classic fantasy races like elves, dwarfs and orcs. This alone makes it interesting enough to play, but its unconventional take on the role-playing game in a world of street samurai, deckers and riggers takes it to a whole other level. And while the original game is still fantastic, the expansion Dragonfall is even better. If you love the consequence of Mass Effect, or you really can't wait for Cyberpunk 2077 to play a game which features every shade of moral grey imaginable, Shadowrun Returns is simply essential. Gemini Roo is a moody point-and-click adventure from Dave Gilbert, the man who recently brought us the equally brilliant Unavowed. It's primarily about 2 different characters and how their fates intertwine. Azrael Odin, an ex-assassin stationed on the rain-slicked planet of Baracus, and Delta 6, a man who wakes up locked in a rehabilitation centre with no memory of who he is or how he got there. The beauty of the game lies in how these stories intersect. With its hand-drawn backgrounds and compelling story, Gemini Roo recalls those classic LucasArts adventures, but it's surprisingly deep. You'll have to perform actual detective work to solve the game's mysteries. And much like Unavowed, this is all especially impressive considering it was developed by one person on an aging adventure game engine. Intriguing, understated and inspiring, Gemini Roo is a hard-boiled adventure classic.
Not to me.
Hackmud has an incredible premise. What if humanity vanished, leaving an internet populated by abandoned devices and AI overlords? But perhaps the most interesting thing about Hackmud is how players interface with its world. It's a text-based MMO where players can work together or against each other to hack various systems, make money and explore the game's secrets. You can write actual scripts that can be shared with other players, steal credits and set traps. It's an outrageously deep experience which, 2 years after release, is still full of secrets that players are scrambling to uncover. And while the command line interface and scripting elements might seem intimidating, there are elements designed to draw new players in whose skill set lies elsewhere. That said, it's certainly not for everyone. It's complex, unforgiving and unusual, but for players looking for a different cyberpunk experience, Hackmud could become your next obsession. The first Frozen Synapse was a taut, contained indie game with some great ideas and a narrow focus. The sequel takes those ideas and expands them, adding a single-player campaign set in the city. That's the city with capital letters, in case you weren't sure. A living system full of AI-controlled factions jostling for control. You're essentially in charge of a futuristic SWAT team, free to rob banks, assassinate politicians, betray your associates, and even try diplomacy. The keyword here is choice. And most importantly, if the main story doesn't interest you, you can abandon it completely and forge your own path. But Frozen Synapse is still perhaps at its best in the multiplayer mode established in the original game. Tense tactical battle of wits in which, you hope, your soldiers will carry out their orders with immaculate precision. It's the most intense kind of simulation conceivable in an exhilarating, unforgiving world. So there you go, our genetically enhanced list of games to keep you busy until the technological apocalypse. Please hit that like button if you've seen Attack Ships on Fire off the shoulder of Orion, and subscribe to Logitech G for more top 10s. And if you're watching from the future, just pretend we included Disco Elysium, which is due out next year and looks incredible. Finally, please remember to hit the notifications bell so you know when our next upload goes live, and I'll owe you a futuristic drink.